always a challenge to do a message on Christmas. I was saying before the service, this is my 25th Christmas message. And I pretty much said it all. I'm sorry you didn't miss the other. But I was going over and I said, well, how can I say it something differently? So today what I want to do is I want to go back behind the symbolism of really it all. I want to really talk about the essence of what we're here for and what we're doing, and put it in both the Hanukah light and in the Christian light, but to realize that all of these things are simply symbols of the deep relationship that we have with Spirit. And so the goal today is really to convince you that you have a deep and wonderful relationship with Spirit in the way that you see it and the way that you conceive it. And if you can really feel that relationship when you see it in other people, your friends, your neighbors, your relatives, or you see it in your own particular kind of worship, it is something that strengthens you and gives you meaning for your life. So I want to start today with a poem that I wrote about Christmas first, and then we'll proceed from there. It's here again. The crowds, the noise, the hustle of the season. It's easy to get lost and to forget the purpose and the reason for the celebration and the true meaning of this day. Perhaps it would be better if maybe Christmas went away. Because it's off to shopping, buy the tree, the gifts for all my friends, and Christmas cards and halls of holly. It just seems to never end. But in reflection, I do slow down. And I hear the message, dear. Behind the clamor and the throng, the words come loud and clear. I hear the story of the Christ, and I really feel the peace. And the hustle and bustle of the crowds, I surely can release. The story revolves around the Christ child and his birthday long ago, and why he came to show the way, the journey we all know, to proclaim the divinity of the world, the light of God inside, to keep reminding you and me that in love we do abide. So instead of scurrying and running here and there, just do it all in your private worship and see meaning everywhere. See the sacred in the stores, the sacred in the crowds and traffic too. Every moment becomes a gift of the holy and the new. For that Christ child born so long ago came to show us how that despite the hectic pace we set, if we learn to love, we're sure to get the brightest glow if only we would let, when we release our worries and our fret, and to know that we are already perfect, complete, and whole, and we live the real Christmas from the depths within our soul. So this, I think that kind of sets the mood, is that we live more and more every day in a secular society, but each of us really needs to find that special way in which we connect with the universal. And in the Judeo-Western tradition, that way is, for today in Judaism, is Hanukkah. Although Hanukkah was actually a pretty minor Jewish holiday, it just happened to coincide with around the same time of Christmas, so it worked pretty well. And people say, well, but you have to realize how Christmas even came about, because there was in the Roman times, there was what's called the Festival of the Invincible Sun. And it was a pagan holiday, and everybody celebrated it. And if you trace back that whole history, what you find out is that people in the very depths of winter, when it was really the bleakest, when nothing was growing, when the snows were outside, they were getting depressed. They were cold. They were hungry. They were wet. And so somebody came up with, the optimist in the crowd came up with the idea, let's celebrate. And that's what they did. They lit up their homes. They celebrated the coming of the invincible sun. And that even though they couldn't see it, it was something that was coming and something that would give them the expectation of the new year. And so really that was the motivation really behind that winter celebration. And so in around 370 or 380, when the Roman government decided to take Christianity as the official religion, they simply said, okay, we're going to simply say, arbitrarily, that Jesus was born on December 25th, fits perfectly, and we're going to coincide it with this festival of the Invincible Sun, and everybody will celebrate. And it worked, for most people. I mean, there were times, did you know, for example, there were times in England when they passed a law that said you could not celebrate Christmas because it wasn't in the Bible? People in the actual New World were persecuted by the Pilgrims because they dared to celebrate Christmas. But of course, it didn't work because the flame of the invincible sun and the invincible soul came out and said, we need to have this kind of celebration. And so that's what they did. And in Hanukah, you probably know briefly the story of Hanukah, that for a while the Greeks allowed the Jews to celebrate the way they wanted to celebrate, but around 170 BC, one Greek general said, hey, do you know what? Those guys will not fight on the Sabbath. So let's attack them on the Sabbath. And that's what they did. And they attacked the Jewish people in around 170 BC, and they ran through the temple, and they even changed the whole temple in Jerusalem to a temple of Zeus. And then what they really did that made the Jews very, very upset is they took pig's blood and they poured it all over the temple. Well, that riled them up. And there was a group of them called the Maccabees, and they decided that they would revolt, and they did. And this was really the first real revolt all the way back from 500 BC. If you know your history, around 590 BC, the Jews were actually carried off. The 10 tribes actually disappeared. And from that time on, there was simply occupation. So there was about a period of 100 years before the Romans came in where the Jews actually retook the temple. And when they did retake the temple, they lit the holy menorah in the temple. And the story is that they only had enough oil for one day, but it burned for 8 days. And that's why they have the 8 days of Hanukkah. So now you know the exoteric story of the temple, but there's always an esoteric. There's always, behind the outer story, there's always an inner story. So we can look at their progress as the overcoming. And the period of entire Jewish history is the overcoming of the oppressor, and the idea of l'chaim and life and processing to the future, and the holy oil, the anointing process. The story was that the oil that was used in the temple was the same oil that they used to anoint the kings. And remember, I told you last week that process of anointing was actually the anointing of what was called the Messiah, a Hebrew word, which means the anointed one of God. And this symbol is that you and I are all the anointed ones. We're all the anointed ones. And the word Christ simply means the Messiah in Greek. So when you hear the word Christ, maybe you can think that it means the anointed one of God, and that we are really all anointed. So whether we're Jewish people or Christian people or Buddhist people, we're really all celebrating the same thing. And what is that? What is it that we're really celebrating? What is it that gives us meaning to our lives? I was thinking about it the other day. I get into the idea of quantum physics sometimes and how the universe was actually created. And I want to give you just my idea of the way it is. Okay? Now, this is just my idea, but here's how I see it. In the beginning, there was simply energy. I don't know where the energy came from, but there was simply energy, and it was unmanifest energy. And in the beginning, there was an intelligent creator. And this intelligent creator observed this energy. Now, quantum physics says that when an observer begins to observe something in its wave function, it collapses the wave and creates a particle. And they've proven that in the very smallest, the very subatomic particles are created out of waves, and they are created as a result of observation. We don't have time to go into the reasons why that is, but I think the entire universe was created when God, the ultimate creator, observed the energy and the wave function collapsed and the particles started coming. And then this spiritual presence planted the seed of its own self in all of this energy. It was all planted within it. So the very particles that were created by it grew from minerals to plants to animals until we get to the place in the evolution of awareness where there are first people that could look back and say, where is all this coming from? What's it all about? And what's my relationship to it? And so the first key word that I learned for myself is the word relationship. For me, there cannot be any meaning in life without some kind of relationship. In the beginning, there was just the void. There was no relationship. But when Spirit spoke its word and created the particles from the waves, the first relationship occurred. The relationship between Spirit speaking its word into its creation. So you have a relationship between ultimate Spirit and the created, the creator and the created. So here we are the created, but we are the created coming into the awareness of who we are in relationship. And what makes it all work? Well, I think there's one word that makes it all work, and that word is love. I think that this entire universe was created out of the love of Spirit in order to know itself as creation. And that's exactly what Dr. Ernest Holmes says. In order to know itself as creation, this spiritual power and presence spoke its word into the law and created the stars, the skies, the plants, the animals, and you and I. So here we are. We are here. We are in a physical body. And the way people have looked at it is, how do we communicate with each other? How can I tell you how I feel? How can you really know how I'm thinking about things? And the problem has been called the problem of the skin-encapsulated ego. And what that means is simply, it is difficult, if not impossible, for me to convey to you what is going on in my subjective consciousness. You can kind of guess, but and some people have said, well, there's really nothing going on. Some people have said there isn't anything else out there that exists except your consciousness. You're dreaming everything. But that's not the way science of mind sees it. Science of mind sees that there is a relative world that was created by the Creator, and we are participating in this world. So how do we see, how do we make meaning out of our own lives? And the only way we can do that, in my view, is really through understanding love in relationships. Through first understanding, as Dr. Gisela said this morning, that really, truly, you and I are the beloved. If you can really believe that. If you can really believe that you are loved with an inexhaustible love. A love that never dies, a love that goes on forever, and absolutely convinces you that you are precious and the beloved of God. And then when you can be convinced and know that that truth is there, then you give back to the universe. You look back to the universe. Thomas Troward, who was the grandfather, really, of the science of mind movement, said, if we can really understand that we are created out of the 7 essences of God, and that we live from these 7 essences, we can relate back to this Creator, this Creator that created us, and we can feel this living presence. So what I'm going to ask you to do during this holiday season, as it's coming up, is to look around you, continually see this living presence, and relate to it. To see Spirit, to see God, to see all of these things within you, but also relating to the other person around you. So that so that whatever's going on, whether you see it as a Christmas tree or you see it as holly or you see it as the crowd, what you're really seeing is this relationship of love. And how we see that really depends on how intimate we wish to get with whatever that other person is, whatever that other thing is. And we do that simply by trusting. We trust ourselves that as we reveal who we are at our essence, as we reveal ourselves, others will reveal themselves back to us. And we create a deeper and deeper bond. What is the most precious thing that you can have in your life? Think about it. Think about your entire life from the beginning all the way up to now. What is the most precious thing that you have had? Is it a material thing? Is it some kind of success? Is it some kind of job? Or is the most precious thing that you have ever had a relationship? Something that has given you meaning is something that sparks that relationship. If you look at the whole world, if you look at all the literature of the world, if you look at all the movies we see, and we go behind it all, we see that the most important things that we cherish in life are our relationships. I mean, I personalize it, of course. I can see the relationship with my family, with my son, with my daughter, with my wife, with my relatives. And as we're getting older, some of the relationships leave, new relationships come. But the most important thing is loving in relationships. The most important thing that we can do is open our hearts to Spirit and give of that love that has been in us from the beginning of time. So our challenge as we move forward in life, wherever we're going in life, the most important thing we know is everything changes in life. Relationships are going to change. People are going to go in and out of our life. But the most important thing that we can do ourselves is to practice the art of really loving in relationships. Cherish each precious moment. When we get up in the morning, Lisa and I really do this. We say, this is the precious day that we have. I don't know about you, but as you start to get a little older, you start thinking of your own mortality. You start thinking, how much more time, and I know this isn't straight science of mind, okay? But you start saying, how much more time do we have together? How much more time do we have to be active and on the planet? And of course, we know that principle is not bound by precedent and that we can live to be 120. We know all of those things, but we see that each moment that we have is so precious. So whatever you're doing during this holiday season, wherever you're going, whoever you're with, just take that moment to kind of breathe in and see that person new for the first time. Don't see them according to their story. Don't see them according to what you think their personality is. But see them as a new, perfect, precious child, sons and daughters of the living God. That each of us have been placed here in order to grow in awareness and spirit as to who we are. Let's make this season a season where we can really have that holy reverence for everyone that comes into our lives. And make this Christmas time that perfect, precious, present moment that it is. And that's the truth. And so it is.